I must say to you at first is that never mind the feat of engineering in building this turbine, the feat of engineering in writing your piece is quite something, because there's an amazing amount of information and an incredible amount of research that must have got into your story. I mean, not only do you talk about all of the sort of the necessities of building such a thing, but you even managed to get the Nazis into it.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, all the stats, all the amazing. These turbines can pull the equivalent weight of 16 African elephants and so on. Those come from the turbine manufacturer's website.
Right.
And there's a reason for that. The wind industry is pre-industrial technology trying to pose as the energy producer of the future. And all they've got really is this bigger, better, faster, more stuff. Which is designed to blind the innocent into imagining that, wind turbines, they're just like, they've really come on. They've transcended all the problems that beset the industry in the old days, and now we can power the whole country with these super-duper offshore turbines. They're so big.
Yes.
But it's a load of rubbish.
Well, of course, I was going to say, I mean, I think one of the statistics you recite is that you would literally need thousands of these things, the size of the one that we've seen in the graphic, in the North Sea, which would make the North Sea pretty hard to navigate, I would imagine.
Yeah, and also, they're very, very expensive. The onshore wind turbines cost roughly twice the amount of the cheapest form of power, which is basically gas-fired power stations, electricity. And then offshore wind turbines, because the sea is a hostile environment. You imagine what it's like trying to construct these wind parks out there and trying to maintain them when you've got salt gradually wearing away the turbine blades and so on. They cost about 3 times the amount of conventional electricity. And then you've got the problems of connecting them to the grid and with intermittency. You know, what do you do when the wind's not blowing? Where does the energy come from? Well, it has to come from conventional power. So you're not actually replacing fossil fuel power at all. You've got to have fossil fuel power on
to
standby
power to make the construction and the running of these things. I know this is very,
What do you think about this, Rachel? Because I want to know what your opinion is.
I'm staring with awed amazement at James's double-page spread, pages 30 to 31 of today's Mail.
It's a tremendous effort. It really is.
And the very unequivocal headline on it, which is "Colossal Con Trick." James, do you remember last week, though, we had those stories that, there was that little warm spell, kind of spring and summer. That was blink,
it.
That's it. Blink and you missed it.
Yeah.
But the country ran for 3 whole days without using coal, which is obviously a fossil fuel.
Did it, though?
What's coal's been the cornerstone of our electricity mix, but over those 3 days, zero power came from coal, and it was made up by gas. Wait, a quarter gas and a quarter. What?
When wind turbines work, which is.
Sorry, James. Let me just finish because I couldn't hear what you were saying. Let me just finish the sentence. So we didn't run on coal for 3 days, but we ran a third on gas, a third on wind, and a third on nuclear, right? So wind actually does play its part, even if you need fossil fuels to power wind.
The thing about wind power is that whenever you see the statistics on how much energy these things produce, you always get quoted the figure if they're running at full capacity, if they're running all the time. They tend to operate, on average, at about a third of capacity. So 2/3 of the time, they're not producing significant amounts of electricity. So you say they're an important part of.
No, I said in those 3 days they were.
Implicit in what you said was that they are somehow a necessary thing. I'm saying to you, no, they are the most colossal waste of money. There are many, many better ways of producing energy. They're really subsidy farms for rich landowners or people who have got on this gravy train. They're not actually very useful in terms of supplying our power needs.
And also, presumably, James, the only reason that they are included in the, this is where we get our energy from, is because somebody had the bright idea of erecting a few of these wind farms, which, of course, now have to be used. Because if they hadn't been erected, we wouldn't be getting any power from the wind at all. And we wouldn't be any worse off.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose fair play. One of Rachel's and my contemporaries from Oxford, I know, is heavily into this scene, and he's probably done very, very nicely.
Oh, are we talking about, Julian Azan?
No, I'm talking about Richard North. Something to do with the Green Investment Bank, I think he is.
Okay,
I mean,
right.
Look, there are people who've got onto the green energy gravy train from Al Gore downwards, have done very, very nicely out of this scam. But it is ultimately a form of rent seeking. In other words, it's taking money from the poor, putting it into the pockets of the rich, who
of
would
rich
not be getting
landowners.
that money except for the government subsidies, which are imposed on the taxpayer or the energy user. We get no choice whether we want to use green energy or not. It's shoved on our bills. So this is money for old rope. For anyone on the green gravy train, it's great. You get the money regardless of whether the wind is blowing, whether you're producing electricity or not. I think it's a con trick. It's a conspiracy against the consumer.
Well, indeed. And every time I drive past any sort of big wind farm, there's quite a big one down by Dungeness. There's another one that I see sometimes up in when I go past the Lake District. And you're right to say that at any given time, at least 40 to 60% of the turbines are not even on.
Yeah.
They're not. It's not the question. They're not on. They're not being powered by wind. They're not turning.
Well, they're not turning, so they're not
actually,
on.
they do have to turn them off in high winds, don't they?
Well, no, but that's the other ridiculous situation. I mean, if you've got wind, surely you can harness it. You don't have to turn it off and go, it's too windy for the wind turbine.
Yeah. So they don't work when there's no wind. They have to be turned off when it's too windy.
Yeah.
And even then, the producers get subsidised. They get paid to turn off the turbines. I mean, that's a ridiculous thing.
Do you remember when David Cameron had one on his roof?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it was in Notting Hill, I think, wasn't it?
But okay, James. So moving on, though. I mean, is solar power less of a con trick?
No, I'd say I do have one or two investor mates who think, solar power's actually a good deal. I think it
in Africa,
certainly in countries like ours and Germany, where they've got the German. I just read a piece about this the other day. The German solar power industry has just collapsed.
Has it? Why?
Because the German government removed the subsidies or reduced the subsidies, and it meant that all the German solar manufacturers have gone bust. The amount of uptake, but the number of people putting up new solar panels has just absolutely collapsed. And its contribution to the Germans' energy is still negligible, even though I mean, you go to Germany.
Well, can I tell you the story of my step-grandmother who's put solar panels on a barn in Wiltshire, and as a result of this, she is being paid money back by the electricity board, and she's in Wiltshire. It's not a sunny county.
So she's
in credit.
She's a net creditor.
Where do you think this money comes from, Rachel?
Yeah,
do you think it comes from the energy she produces, or do you think it maybe comes out of the pockets of ordinary people?
It's coming off my bill in London. That's what's happening.
I don't think she is being paid to have the solar panels. But what she's doing is that she's selling her surplus energy that she's creating from the solar panels back to the grid.
So she's able to run her own house and sell some back and actually make money.
I think you'll find that the whole of the solar industry is heavily subsidised by tariffs which are added onto our electricity bills because basically the government has
I see this green energy thing.
That green is good, and that they want to encourage so-called clean energy, renewable energy, or
who can we blame for all
energy,
this? I mean, was it all the start? Do you remember that at the beginning of Cameron's first premiership, when it was all vote blue, go green, and hug a hoodie? Does it all come from that?
Now, to a degree, Rachel. I mean, you look at what Gove's war on plastic bags and plastic straws.
No, I'm in favour of that.
Yeah,
it's getting a bit hysterical now, isn't it?
No, it's not.
It's getting ridiculous
No,
now.
carry on, James. What do you...
I think that in the last, since the birth of the Cameron era, the Conservative party has been at a loss for how to find some sort of eye-catching initiative which will win over old Conservative voters, but B, win the hearts and minds of people in the middle, like yourself, Rachel. And they've settled on this rather desperate measure of coming down heavily on plastic straws and plastic bags. I would contend that there are actually bigger issues that this country faces right now, and that this is all the distraction. But it does seem to be that this is their kind of marketing policy. Yeah, we're gonna really buy into all this green stuff and forget the rest.
Right. Is there also a sense at the moment, because I do read from time to time that there's a growing sort of enthusiasm in this government for nuclear energy, and do you think that that's just a fad, or do you think that because of the failures of like what you've just described, solar panels and wind,
the nuclear thing, the Hinkley point B or point C, I forget. That's another absolute contract.
Yeah.
We are paying through the nose for completely overpriced nuclear technology, and outdated nuclear technology. We don't even know when it's going to come
from abroad.
Stream. There are many cheaper modular reactors we could have bought. We've bought out-of-date technology from the Chinese, from the French. At way over the going rate. I mean, I'm not saying that nuclear isn't possibly a solution, but not at the deal that was struck for us by the last. I think it was struck under the coalition government when
there's another George Osborne sort of time bomb. Yeah, I mean, it just seems as though there's nobody in charge of the clattering train. But I'm noticing as well from your big graphic today in the piece of the Mail that construction's already begun on the Hornsea Project 1, 75 miles off the Yorkshire coast. 174 turbines. I mean, you talked about how difficult it is to build these things in the sea. I mean, this is an incredible, gargantuan project, isn't it?
Well, I think engineers have privately been saying for years this is not going to work.
Yeah.
They're supposed to have a shelf life of a working life of 25 years. That's what it says on the advertising blurb.
Yeah.
In fact, what we've seen is from Dutch manufacturers in the North Sea, the Germans, that their turbine blades have had to be replaced at enormous expense, because, I mean, these things are really big. I mean, imagine what it's like getting them down and shipping them to shore to repair. These things are having to be replaced much earlier. And we haven't even mentioned the other problem. I mean, these are supposed to be green, but there are lots of stories about marine life being taken out by these supposedly eco-friendly turbines.
Well, they confuse whales and things, don't they?
The low frequency noise that they produce causes it disrupts the sonar of whales and dolphins and things.
Yeah.
So and of course they chop up any seabirds that are foolish enough.
Well, hold on, they don't exactly whir very fast, do they? How can they chop up seabirds?
They do actually. Have you not seen them when they go round really quickly? They do go. They go like a plane's propeller. They do.
Really?
Yeah. Particularly the outer tip of the blade. They go.
I can see that
really
if it
fast.
flew into that, you'd be happy.
It looks like they're moving really slowly when you see them going past, but they kill. On land, they kill. I mean, around the world, they're responsible for millions of bird and bat deaths every year.
It's kind of a mad world, isn't it? You just think the more you look into it, the more ridiculous it seems, and you kind of go, well, isn't there ever anybody in the room that says, "Are you sure about this? Do you really want to do this?"
It's even more ridiculous when you think about the fact that, I mean, you know how the American economy has been completely transformed by their shale oil and shale gas. I mean, America used to be heavily dependent, like the rest of us, on importing oil and gas from the Middle East. America is now the world's biggest producer of fossil fuel power, and the reason for that is that they perfected this technique called fracking, which over here you've got all these campaign groups funded, by the way, by either hard left anti-capitalist green campaign groups, or in some cases by the Russians, because Putin can't bear to have fracking because it cuts in on his gas
business.
But we have got in the north of England, we've got something called the Bolan Shale, which is a shale formation which is deeper than I think pretty much anything in the US. And yet we are unable to develop our natural gas resources because of all these little campaign groups which are saying, no, it causes earthquakes. Well, it doesn't cause earthquakes. I mean, not in a kind of, we're not talking, San Andreas fault stuff. We're talking a sort of a light rattling of your cup. Possibly.
Well, they had sort of one earthquake in Blackpool, didn't they? And suddenly everybody blamed it on the nearby fracking, which hadn't even started yet. They had sort of digging about.
Unfortunately, we've got a government which has not got the our energy department has.
Oh.
Now, we've been having this problem quite a bit. James is gone. So we'll just never have to think, oh, he's back. Hello, you're back. Sorry, James.
Sorry, did I get cut off? I was here all the time.
Yeah, all right. No, sorry.
No, you
Go
suddenly
on, carry
cut
on.
out.
Oh, my goodness. No, I was saying we've got this very craven government which caves in to the slightest pressure from green activists, and they're not willing to go out there and say, look, shale could be really good for our economy. It could be really good for energy users, really good for all those people who die in fuel poverty every year. I mean, that's a national disgrace. You'd have thought that actually a chance to make energy cheaper, to enable the poor to be able to heat their houses and so on, these would all be good measures, vote-winning measures. And if we developed our shale gas potential, that would be the best way forward. And it would also, of course, give us the holy grail of energy security. We wouldn't have to import from the Russians. We wouldn't be reliant on, stuff from abroad, from the Middle East or whatever. We'd have our own supplies.
Indeed.
James, I've known you for ages and ages, and I just wondered why are you suddenly interested? Why are you putting your tanks on Matt Ridley's lawn?
Well, but Matt Ridley's on. I don't want to put my tanks on his lawn because I'm an ally of his.
I know, that's what I mean. What I'm saying is this is Matt Ridley. This is Matt Ridley territory.
Because this is you and I are the same generation, and we both went into journalism. And I never intended to become this kind of the notorious climate change skeptic, or indeed to.
Are you a climate change skeptic?
Specialising.
Oh, please, James, you're a Brexiter and a climate change denier.
Yeah. And I'm pro-Trump. I mean, I've got the full pack.
Yeah, got the T-shirt.
But just to finish answering the question that you asked, I think that the fourth estate, journalists have completely failed on the issue of the environment. There are so many low-hanging fruit for those of us who prepared to just look at the issues carefully and realise that we're being sold a pup. That wind turbines are not the answer. Shale gas have been oversold as an environmental threat. Climate change is grossly overdone, grossly talked up by the green lobby. And anyone
James.
who does their research can see this.
I think you're absolutely right, and we have to go. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
I think you're wrong.
I
think you're wrong.
Well,
and
we can argue about that.
Generations
we can
to come
argue
will
about that.
hold you responsible.
No, they
James.
won't. You see, that's the kind of rhetoric that gets people into terrible trouble because it's not James Delingpole's fault.